Hello, so welcome to the third reading of Anastasia ringing Cedars. I am ahead of reading this book. I've read the first book, I'm on the second book, and I'm really experiencing a deeper connection to nature as I've been reading this. I'm really noticing that. So I'm sure as you get through these videos, as you continue, you also will be. What I'm actually going to do is maybe on the next reading, because I'm on book 2 now, and there's a chapter about this cherry tree which is just so beautiful. So I might even just do a video where I read just that chapter. So whilst it is ahead, it doesn't really matter. You can read it in isolation. So I'll do that for the next one that I do. So I'll mention it again when I do the next reading. I'll link that at the end for people. So let's just take just a little moment. Let's just take a deep breath. Let's just bring ourselves right into the here and now. Let's call in the dragons. Let's call in the dragons. Let's call in our angels. Let's call in our guides, our ancestors. Let's call in the elementals, the fae, to be with us as we turn on the fire, as we sit around the campfire and we settle in for part 3 of story time, which starts with who are they? Subsequently, after spending 3 days with Anastasia and observing how this strange young woman lives all by herself in the remote Siberian taiga, I began to understand a little something of her lifestyle, and to be confronted by a number of questions regarding our own. One of them still haunts me to this day. Is our system of education and bringing up children sufficient to comprehend the meaning of existence, to arrange every individual's life priorities in the correct order? Well, I can answer that. No. And I'm sure if you're watching this video, you're starting to awaken to the fact that absolutely no, it is not sufficient by a long shot. This is part of the awakening we're going through, and there's going to be many people that the schooling system, it is going to change. Does it help or hinder our ability to make sense of man's essence and purpose? We have set up a vast educational system. It is on the basis of this system that we teach our children and each other in kindergarten, school, university and postgraduate programs. And we can see this, right? We can look at the high levels of suicide amongst children, adults. We can look at all this and we can know that no, we just have to be able to be honest about it so that we can start to change it, and it is going to change. It is this system that enables us to invent things, to fly into space. We structure our lives in accordance with it. Through its help, we strive to construct some happiness for ourselves. We strive to fathom the universe and the atom, along with all sorts of anomalous phenomena. We love to discuss and describe them at great length in sensational stories in both the popular press and the scholarly publications. But there is one phenomenon which, for some reason, we try with all our might to avoid, desperately try to avoid. One gets the impression that we are afraid to talk about it. We are afraid, I say, because it could so easily knock the wind out of our commonly accepted systems and education and scientific deductions and make a mockery of the reality of our experience. And we try to pretend that such a phenomena does not exist, but it does. And it will continue to exist however much we try to turn away from it or avoid it. Isn't it time to take a closer look at this and just maybe, through the collective effort of all our human minds together, find an answer to the following question? If you take all our great thinkers, without exception, people who have formulated religious teachings, all sorts of teachings which the vast majority of humanity are following, or at least endeavouring to follow, why is it that before formulating their teachings they became recluses, went into solitude, in most cases to the forest, not to some super academy, mind you, but to the forest? Why did the Old Testament's Moses go off into a mountaintop forest before returning and presenting to the world the wisdom set forth on his tablets of stone? Why did Christ Jesus go off away from his disciples into the desert, mountains and forests? Why did a man named Siddhartha Gautama, I think that's the Buddha in it, who lived in India in the 6th century BC, spent 7 years alone in the forest, after which this recluse came out of the forest back to humanity, complete with a set of teachings which even to this day, many centuries later, aroused a multitude of human minds. And people build huge temples and call these teachings Buddhism. And the man himself eventually came to be known as Buddha. And what about our own not so ancient forebearers, now acknowledged as historical figures, such as Seraphim Savorsky or Sergei Randowsky? Okay, there's some Russian names here which I'm struggling with, so I do apologise. Why did they too go off to become recluses in the forest? And how were they able, after a short period of time there, to so fathom the depths of wisdom that the kings of the world made the long journey through uncharted wilderness to seek their advice? Monasteries and majestic temples were raised at the locations of their respective solitudes. Thus, for example, the Trinity Monastery in the town of Severje Postad near Moscow today attracts thousands of visitors each year. And it all started from a single forest recluse. Why? Who and what enabled these people to obtain their wisdom? Who gave them knowledge? Who brought them closer to understanding the essence of life? How did they live? What did they do? What did they think about during their forest solitude? These questions confronted me some time after my conversations with Anastasia. Oh, just a beautiful white butterfly just flying outside the window. Perfect timing. After I'd started reading everything that I could lay my hands on regarding recluses. But even today I haven't found the answers. Why has nothing been written about their solitude experience? The answers, I think, must be sought through a collective effort. I'm trying to describe the events of my 3-day stay in the Siberia taiga forest and my impressions from my experience with Anastasia, in the hopes that someone will be able to fathom the essence of this phenomena and put together a clearer picture of our way of life. So obviously, if you're watching this, you're probably into meditation, spending time in nature. It's in these times that we connect to our higher essences. It's in these times, in these stillnesses, that we can hear our own voice, that we can connect to our God source spark. We are all connected to God. We all are a fractal, an emanation of God, of the universe. So therefore we have access to all information, all divine wisdom and knowledge. But this whole world has been there to keep us outside of that, distracted, in stress, so we cannot connect to the truth of who we are. And it is through this solitude, through this connection, through meditation, nature, that we connect and we get the answers. The answers come forward. For now, on the basis of all that I have seen and heard, only one thing is crystal clear to me. People who live in solitude in the forest, including Anastasia, see what is going on in our lives from a point of view completely different from our own. Some of Anastasia's ideas are the exact opposite of what is commonly accepted. Who is closer to the truth? Who can judge? My task is simply to record what I have seen and heard and thereby give others an opportunity to come up with answers. Anastasia lives in the forest, altogether alone. She has no house to call her own. She hardly wears any clothes and does not store any provisions. She is the descendant of people who have been living here for thousands of years and represents what is literally a whole different civilization. And I just have to say, right, because I said loads of magic is happening. Just and you'll be experiencing signs and synchronicities from nature. They'll be coming on strong as you continue to read this with me. But in a meditation a couple of nights ago, I got this vision of a squirrel. A squirrel came in. Obviously, there's so many squirrels in the forest. And you're going to, as we move on here, hear about Anastasia's connection to squirrels and how they collect nuts for her. She lives off berries, nuts and mushrooms. In fact, we might have even read it. I can't even remember. I had this vision of this squirrel. And yesterday when I was walking in the woods, literally these nuts fell on my head from the tree. I've actually got them. I collected 13 nuts that just fell on my head from the tree. So she's a descendant of people who've been living here for thousands of years. So let me know in the comments, right, if you're experiencing any kind of visions, synchronicities, messages as we go through these books. represents what is literally a whole different civilization. She and those like her have survived to the present day through what I can only term the wisest possible course of action, very likely the only correct course of action. When they are among us, they blend in with us, trying to appear no different from ordinary people. But in their places of habitual residence, they merge with nature. It's not easy to find their habitual dwelling places. Indeed, man's presence in such places is betrayed only by the fact that they are more beautiful and better taken care of, like Anastasia's forest glade, for example. Anastasia was born here and is an integral part of the natural surroundings. In contrast to our celebrated recluses, she did not go off into the forest simply for a time, as they did. She was born in the taiga and visits our world only for brief periods. And what seemed at first glance to be a mysterious phenomenon, the strong fear that overwhelmed me and made me lose consciousness when I attempted to possess Anastasia, turned out to have an altogether simple explanation. Just as we tame a cat, a dog, an elephant, a tiger, an eagle, and so on, here everything around has been tamed. So it says here what he means by tamed is, in this case, meaning brought into an interrelationship with man, right? So it's like collaborating with man, being a friend of man. So it turned out, Anastasia turned out to have an altogether simple explanation. As we have tamed a cat, a dog, so it's saying like, she, like we live with our domestic cats and dogs, she's living with bears and eagles and squirrels. They're part of her family. And this everything, and so on, here everything around has been tamed, and this everything cannot permit anything bad to happen to her. Anastasia told me that when she was born and while she was still under a year old, her mother could leave her alone on the grass. And you didn't die from hunger, I asked. The tiger recluse first looked at me in surprise, but then explained, food should be absolutely of no concern to man. One should eat just as one breathes, not paying attention to nutrition, not distracting one's thought from more important issues. The Creator has left this task up to others so that man can live as man. And I'll just remind you that man means creation, female, male, dog, cat, all of creation, fulfilling its own destiny. I actually think by man she means the actual human race here. She snapped her fingers and right away a little squirrel popped up beside her. Hopping onto her hand, Anastasia lifted the creature's muzzle up to her mouth, and the squirrel passed from its mouth into hers a cedar nut seed, its shell already removed. Perhaps next time we're going to the forest, the squirrel's going to de-shell the nut for me as well, let's see, right? This did not seem to me anything out of the ordinary. I remembered how back at the academy complex near Novosibirsk, a lot of squirrels were quite used to people and would beg for food from passers-by and even get angry if they weren't given anything. Here I was simply observing the process in reverse. But this here was the tiger, and I said, in the normal world, our world, everything's arranged differently. You, Anastasia, could try snapping your fingers at a privately run kiosk or even be on a drum and nobody would give you anything. Yet here you're saying the Creator has decided everything. And what came to me, so I just have to add this, like I remember seeing a video on Facebook, it was in 2020, and it was outside a co-op, a shop, and the doors automatically opened as people came in, and this seagull just walked in, went over to there was like the fridge with the sandwiches in, was just there. It had no door, it was just like an open fridge. Just went in, picked up a sandwich and just walked out of the shop. It was absolutely brilliant. And then this woman came back and she actually tried to take it off the seagull. I was like, leave the seagull alone. Let it take its sandwich. Anyway, thankfully the seagull got the woman to get off. I just thought it was brilliant. The seagull's like, hey, there's food, I need to eat, I'm just going to get food, right? Don't understand this logic of the crazy logic we've created, right? Where some people literally cannot eat if they don't have money. It's insane. It's insane. Anyway, I digress. So this is the kind of dialogue I had with Anastasia on the question of human subsistence. Her position is simple. It is sinful to waste thought on things like food. Now, I don't believe in sin, by the way, but hey-ho. And she does not think about it, because she does mention the word sin a lot, and I just do not believe in that at all. But for us, and that's up to us individually, right? But for us, in our civilized world, as it happens, we are obliged to give it thought. We know from books, and also what I'd say, sometimes when we are also receiving information of people, be that our guides or whatever, we can also interpret that for our own fault. So she might not even use the word sinful, and he might have heard it as sinful. I mean, I don't know, maybe she did use that word, but I just feel not, because I just really don't believe that the way that's been created in the Bible is really to make people feel like they're just bad being born, and that's not the truth. Man has been created so that God could express itself in this playground, right? It's just that we've gone through an inversion and an overlay, which is what we're waking up from. So it may be that she didn't even use that word, but that's how it's interpreted, because obviously we can see that he is religious, or and it may not be anymore, like, as we move through the books potentially, right? But from the start he does talk about the Bible, so we can see that he is, he does read the Bible, or he is religious. So it could be that is the filter of why it's coming through. Like I said, I do not believe in sin. Okay, so her position is simple. It's sinful to waste thought on things like food, and she does not think about it. But for us, in our civilized world, as it happens, we are obliged to give it thought. We know from books, reports in the press, and TV programs of a multiple of examples of infants who have found themselves out in the wilds and ended up being fed by wolves. In this case, however, generations of people have made their permanent residence here, and their relationship to the animal kingdom is different from ours. I asked Anastasia, "Why aren't you cold?" When here I am in a warm jacket, because she replied, "The bodies of people who wrap themselves in clothing and shelter themselves from the cold and heat more and more lose their ability to adapt to changes in their environment. In my case, this capacity of the human body has not been lost, and so I really have no need for any clothing," right? And that's what we're going to as well be waking. We've got so many natural, we are made to exist in this planet in harmony. All this stuff we've been programmed to believe we need is actually taking us away from our natural self. So as she's saying there, our bodies then lose because it doesn't need to use those abilities. So it's like with your brain, right? If you're never using it, if you're never engaging yourself, then you start to lose with your muscles. If you're never pumping, if you're never doing anything that allows you to, or not necessarily pumping weights, but allows you to use your muscles, then you're going to lose. Your muscles are going to deteriorate. So it's the same with our natural abilities that God has given us. They're going to deteriorate if we stop using them, because we're using artificial means. So it makes total sense, right? A forest bedroom. I wasn't at all equipped to spend a night in the wilds of the forest. Anastasia put me to bed in some kind of cave hollowed out of the ground. Exhausted after my wearying trek, I soon fell fast asleep. When I woke up, I felt a sense of bliss and comfort, as though I was lying in a magnificently comfortable bed. The cave or dugout was spacious, the floor covered with small feathery cedar twigs and dried grass, which filled the surrounding space with a fragrant aroma. As I stretched and spread my limbs, one hand touched a furry pelt, and I determined at once that Anastasia must be something of a hunter. I moved closer to the pelt, pressing my back to its warmth, and decided to have another little snooze. Anastasia was standing near the entranceway to my forest bedroom. Noticing I was awake, she said at once, "May this day come to you with blessings, Vladimir, and I invite you in turn to greet it with your blessing. Only please do not be frightened." Then and isn't that a lovely way to greet her, right? Just think about, this came into my awareness years ago when I was working in the slave system. I realised I used to just get out of the bed, stressed, and be like, get out of bed, like, I've got all this stuff to do, straight to work, stress. So you just start your day and just look at she's starting the day, just, blessing him, blessing the day, expecting the day to be blessed and beautiful, and that makes such a difference. She's so happy, right? She's waking, she's in the forest, she don't have anything that we have, and she's just so happy and content. So Anastasia was okay, so may this day come to you with blessings, Vladimir, and I invite you in turn to greet it with your blessing. Only please do not be frightened. Then she clapped her hands, and all at once the pelt, I was in horror struck at the realisation that this was no pelt. Out of the cave a huge bear began to gingerly crawl. Receiving a pat of approval from Anastasia, the bear licked her hand and began lumbering off into the forest. It turned out that she had placed some belladonna herbs by my head and made the bear lie down beside me so I wouldn't get cold. She herself had curled up outdoors in front of the entranceway. Now, how could you do such a thing to me, Anastasia? You could have torn me to shreds or crushed me to death. First of all, it is not a he. I love this, but a she bear. just reminded me, right? I'm sorry, like the other day I was talking to my friend and she was talking about her partner going into meditation and seeing this rainbow bridge. Now I've seen that rainbow bridge as well, and when she said it, what came into my mind was Care Bear. Was this Care Bear when I was a little girl. I used to love Care Bears, and I used to have this pink Care Bear. It's like, obviously she was a girl, this little pink Care Bear, and she had this little rainbow across her chest. So she could not possibly have done anything to harm you. Anastasia responded, she's very obedient. She really enjoys it when I give her tasks to carry out. She never even budged the whole night, just nuzzled her nose up to my legs and kept blissfully still. She was so happy. Only she did give a little shudder whenever you waved your arms about in your sleep and slapped her backside. I love it. Now, again, it's reminding me as well, I was recently in Costa Rica. Sorry, I don't know why I said Costa Rica then. I was recently in Costa Rica, but it wasn't Costa Rica I was thinking about. I was recently in Nicaragua, and I was talking to this, I'd gone for a coffee this morning, just looking out at the sea, and I got talking to this guy, and he was from Canada, and he actually lived in this, it was called Bell something, I forget the name, I'll have to check it, I've got it on my phone. And part of what he did was he worked with the bears, right? He had this he was in the forest and the river with all these bears, and he was just saying the same, right? Bears are not what we've been led to believe about them. We've been made to fear them, and that creates the tension. And he was talking about how loving they are, how they don't want to hurt you. It was just so they're so misunderstood. Right? They're misunderstood because we get given a narrative about nature to make us fear nature. We're in 2024 now. Last year in 2020, last year in 2023, there was the news tried to get us to fear the sun, right? And they've done that many times, getting us to fear nature, fear the sun, fear the things that gives us life. Anastasia's morning. I mean, don't get me wrong. If I woke up in a bed, I might freak out of it because that fear's been programmed into our body. So we've got to deprogram those things out of our bodies. So, I'm not saying go and hug a bear yet. Anastasia's morning. So Anastasia goes to bed at nightfall in one of the shelters hollowed out by the creatures of the forest, most often in the bear's dugout. When it is warm, she can sleep right on the grass. The first thing she does upon waking is offer an exuberant outburst of joy to the rising sun, to the new sprouts on all the twigs, to the new shoots of growth popping up from the earth. She touches them with her hands, strokes them, occasionally adjusts something into place. Then she runs over to the little trees and gives them a thump on their trunks. The tree tops shake and shower down on her something resembling pollen or dew. Then she lies down on the grass and spends about 5 minutes blissfully stretching and squirming. Her whole body becomes covered with what appears to be a moist cream. Then she takes a run and jumps into her little lake, splashes about and dives down. She's a terrific diver. Her relationship with the animal world around her is very much like people's relationships with their household pets. Many of them watch Anastasia as she does her morning routine. They don't approach her, but all she has to do is look in the direction of one of them and make the tiniest beckoning gesture, and the lucky one jumps up on the spot and rushes to her feet. I saw how one morning she clowned around playing with a she-wolf, just as she might play with a family dog. Anastasia clapped the wolf on her shoulder and dashed off at full tilt. The wolf gave chase, and just as she was about to catch up with her, Anastasia, still on the run, suddenly jumped in the air, repelled herself with both feet off the trunk of the tree, and dashed off in another direction. The wolf couldn't stop but kept on running past the tree, finally making an about turn and chasing after the laughing Anastasia. Anastasia gives absolutely no thought to feeding or clothing herself. She most often walks about nude or semi-nude and sustains herself with cedar nuts, along with varieties of herbs, berries and mushrooms. She eats only dried mushrooms. She never goes hunting for nuts or mushrooms herself. She never stores up any kind of provisions, even for the winter. Everything is prepared for her by the multitude of squirrels dwelling in these parts. Squirrels storing up nuts for the winter is nothing out of the ordinary. That's what they do everywhere, following their natural instincts. I was struck by something else though. At the snap of Anastasia's fingers, any squirrels nearby would compete to be the first to jump out into her outstretched hand and give her the kernel of an already shelled cedar nut. And whenever Anastasia slaps her leg bent at the knee, the squirrels make some sort of sound as if signalling the others, and they all start bringing dried mushrooms and other supplies and piling them up before her on the grass. Amazing, right? She's living in such ease and grace and flow. And this they do, it seemed to me, with a good deal of pleasure. I thought she had trained them herself, but Anastasia told me that their actions were, so to speak, instinctive. And the mother squirrel herself teaches this to her little ones by example. Perhaps one of my early forebearers once trained them, but most likely this is simply what they are destined to do, right? So animals are destined to work with man, to help man to live in harmony, to live in ease, to live in flow. And by being turned against nature, cutting off nature, well, we can see the life that we've created for ourselves, which is stress and hard work, and that's what we're moving away from, right? So I don't want to harp on too much about that, because we're moving away from that. If you're reading this book now, you are already connected deeply to nature, and you've just been drawn to these books to really remember and reawaken that connection even deeper. By the time winter has set in, each squirrel has stored up several times as many supplies as if it can use for itself. To my question, how do you keep from freezing during the winter without the proper clothing, Anastasia replied with a question of her own. In your world, are there no examples of people able to withstand the cold without any kind of clothing? And I remembered the book by Ivanhoe, who went around barefoot and wearing only shorts no matter how cold the weather. It tells in the book how the fascists, wanting to test the endurance abilities of this extraordinary Russian, poured cold water over him in a minus 20-degree frost, and then made him ride naked in a motorcycle sidecar. In her early childhood, in addition to her mother's milk, Anastasia was able to draw upon the milk. This actually, it's interesting she's talking about the milk, because I happened to see an advert somewhere. I don't know where I saw it, because what was I watching? Anyway, I happened to see an advert, and it was for milk, not breast milk, manufactured processed milk. Now, this is not like, I know that some women find it hard to breastfeed, but honestly, it's crazy that this industry has been created to replace the natural. Imagine what actually comes. Imagine what is really happening in that process, not process, but that bonding, that mother feeding her own milk to the child. Now I actually think that many people have problems with doing this organically due to what's being created, the toxins, etc. So that naturally, if we were left to our natural devices, that wouldn't be a problem. But the fact that we've created all these artificial things to replace nature's own tonic. So in her early childhood, in addition to her mother's milk, Anastasia was able to draw upon the milk of many different animals. They freely allowed her access to their nipples. She makes absolutely no ritual of mealtime, never sits down just to eat, but picks berries and sprouts or plants as she walks and continues on her activities. By the end of my 3-day stay with her, I could no longer relate to her as I had done at our first encounter. After all I had seen and heard, Anastasia had been transformed from me into some kind of being, but not a beast, since she has such a high degree of intelligence. And then there's her memory. Her memory is such that she, of course, forgets nothing of what she has seen or heard at any moment in time. At times it seemed that her abilities are well beyond the comprehension of the average person, but this very attitude towards her is something that greatly distresses or upsets her. I understand that. She's trying to say, this is natural. I am not supernatural. We are all supernatural. This is what she's trying to say. This is how we are supposed to be. We've just been programmed away from all these skills. And right now you will be experiencing more and more telepathy. You've experienced telepathy in your life because it's a natural skill. We don't actually, back in the day we wouldn't have communicated through a phone. That phone is an artificial representation of our natural abilities to connect in and have conversations with each other, and it's just the programs that have stopped us from doing that. But again, we're going to go back to that. So observing your own life, your own abilities to do things like tune into information through telepathy, just to know things in the body, just know things, to see the future interacting with the present and the past, because you've been given signs and synchronicities. Like I say, it's gonna explode. It's going to become even more so in your life as we move through these books. In contrast to certain people we all know with unusual abilities, people who wrap themselves in an aura of mystery and exclusivity, she constantly tried to explain and reveal the mechanisms underlying her abilities, to prove that there was nothing supernatural to man in them or in her, that she was man, a woman, and she repeatedly asked me to bear that in mind. I did attempt to keep it in mind after that and tried to find an explanation for these extraordinary phenomena. In our civilizations, one brain works to develop a life for oneself, obtain food to eat, and satisfy one's sexual instincts. In Anastasia's world, no time is spent on these things whatsoever. Even people who find themselves in a situation like the Lavkovs are obliged to constantly give thought to how to feed and shelter themselves. They don't get help from nature to the same extent as Anastasia does. There are all sorts of tribes living far from civilization that are not blessed with this kind of contact. According to Anastasia, it's because their thoughts are not pure enough. Nature and the animal world feel this. Right, I'm going to leave it there for this one. And the next reading, we'll be moving on to chapter 7. But this is the second time I'm reading this. I have to say, you start to connect to it even deeper the more you read it. So feel free to go back and re-listen to this once we get to the end of this book. But I hope you enjoyed that, and I'm just sending you so many blessings and miracles. I hope that miracles shine down on you, rain down on you, that you get a tsunami of blessings and miracles today.